Hi guys, welcome to another release video, which means we have a new version of Crowdrender 0.16 or version 0.16 is available from our website right now, and you can download it for free, which is very exciting. It took a little bit longer than we would have liked to release, but it's ready now. And this video is basically I suppose you could say it's a tutorial / demonstration. We're going to show you how to use it, and it's also going to form part of our documentation, so it'll be a good video to bookmark. It's going to be pretty useful. Now, before I dive right into that and get started showing you how to use it, I just want to take about a minute of this video to firstly say thanks to everyone who's supported us so far, and also ask for your support. And if that's something that makes you feel squeamish or you don't want to participate in supporting us, that's fine. Just feel free to skip this bit. We won't be offended. So, firstly, thank you to friends and family. Like, really, thank you. And especially to my parents who invested both money, time and emotional support in this project and got it to where it is today. So thank you guys. It meant more than I can express in words. Also, thank you to, believe it or not, our state government. We applied for a grant to build Crowdrender, and we won a grant, which was awesome. And we just dealt with some really great people, and they know who they are. They helped us a lot, and we really enjoyed just interacting with them. They were great folk, so thank you guys. And of course, last but not least is, well, all of you who watch our videos, download our software, use it, send bug reports, especially to all the guys, thank you so much, who've donated to the crowdfunding campaign. Didn't want to forget about you. Thank you as well. And now to the plugging part. So Crowdrender is now maturing. We don't have a beta out yet, but we're getting close. We've just hit about 3,000-ish unique downloads, so it seems to be gathering momentum, and we're getting more and more positive feedback as well as bug reports, but it's a project which seems to be taking off. So we want to both thank people but also encourage you guys that this is something that's worth your time and worth trying, and if you're of the persuasion, worth perhaps a bit of your cash. So if you would like to financially contribute, there's two ways you can do that, which I'll quickly describe. The first is through our crowdfunding campaign, link in the description below. We have a crowdfunding campaign hosted on our website, and you can go there and read about where the funds are going to and what development comes out of that campaign. Second, we have worked with Blender Grid, which is run by Richard van der Oost, who's a great guy from the Netherlands, and we have mushed our systems together so that you can basically render on his servers using Crowdrender. And it's a paid service, so think of it kind of like an online render farm, but it's a kind of a different way of doing it, where you can render both on the cloud and on your own hardware at the same time, which saves you a little bit of money. So if you want to render something really fast and you are okay with spending money on that, then I encourage you to check it out. It's a partnership between us and Blender Grid, and basically our share of the income goes back into funding development. So that's pretty much the plug and the ask for support done. So with that out of the way, now we can dive right into actually showing you how the software works in 0.16 and some of the new stuff we've got, which might be of interest to you. So let's get on with that. Okay, so jumping straight into it, the first thing we're going to do is get the software. So how do you get the software? Well, it's fairly simple. You come to our website and, there's download buttons aplenty. So there's one here, and there's one there, and they all go to the same place. And you log in, or if you haven't got an account yet, you sign up, and that's a free account. It gives you access to all of the previous versions of software. It also gives you access to a free cloud account, which you can, if you wish, then add some credit and try out the cloud rendering that I just mentioned in the introduction. I'll leave that until later in the video. Pretty much right now what we're going to do is go ahead and download the latest version, hit this button, and then you'll see that you can save the file. Okay, so with the file now downloaded to your hard disk, and I recommend put it on the desktop or something, we can go into Blender. So we've got Blender started here. I'm using 2.79b official for today because we still don't have a beta for 2.8, so we'll just use what the official build is for today. And we basically go into user preferences, so you can do that from the menu here. And if you already have a Crowdrender version installed, you'll need to remove it, and you'll need to remove it on every single computer you want to use it with. So make sure you do that, completely remove them. If you're on Mac or Linux, you just hit remove and it'll do it. If you're on Windows, you've got to make sure that you start Blender with this checkbox for Crowdrender cleared. If it's not clear, then it won't work. So just make sure if you're on Windows, you save your user settings with the checkbox cleared, and then you can restart Blender and then click remove. It's just a limitation of how Windows doesn't like it when two processes have the same file open and then one of them tries to delete it. The operating system says no, that's not allowed. That's probably too much technical jargon already, so essentially just remove them and then we can install a new one. And to do that we just use install from file. Handy little button, and then we just go to, I'll put it on my desktop, so here we go. So it should look something like this when you download it. Crowdrender 016 release, and then you just hit install add-on from file. That installs the add-on. I've got two installed here, so I'm going to make sure I actually enable the right one, and then we can just hit enable. That enables it, and then to actually get it to work, you have to hit start, something I will go into in a future episode perhaps, but the start button then actually starts the add-on working. You can see there's notifications popping up and it's telling you that it's doing stuff, and generally that just gives you confidence that the thing's working properly. So, user preferences. First improvement for 016 is we've made this a bit easier to read just by putting everything in its own boxes. Files, I think, was in 015, but if you haven't cottoned onto this yet, you can actually change where Crowdrender stores its logging and its files from other computers. So this is all the blend files from other computers. Logs. If you have a problem, you can now press zip logs, and we've changed this so now it actually names the zip file for you and actually locates it by default on the desktop. So you can just go zip logs. So much better. And bug reporting still happens the same way. Pretty much just you click this and it will open a web browser for you and take you straight to a form that you can fill out, and you can attach your log results and tell us that you've had an issue. You can also use it to actually suggest improvements. So when you click this form, you can attach your file, and so you attach your log file like that, and then just tell us a little bit about what's happened or what you think could be improved. But the big thing I wanted to really talk about was analytics. Analytics basically is, if you hover your mouse over it, it'll actually tell you. So this allows our add-ons to send warnings, errors, and performance data. Now it does use a little bit of bandwidth, and the information that it sends is anonymized. Like, it doesn't have your name, any personal details in it or anything like that, because all it is warnings and error codes from our software. But we did want to be transparent and say that's what's happening. Now, you can turn this off. It is on by default, but with a simple click of a button, you can turn it off and save your user settings, and it will stop sending errors, warnings, and performance data, and it won't use any of your bandwidth. We would obviously love it if you kept this on, because it just means that we get lots and lots of information about how our add-on performs across lots of different computers. That really does help us if we can get some information about how the add-on works or doesn't work across all those systems. But you can turn it off, and there's no obligation to leave it on or anything like that. We just wanted to let you know if you don't want it to do that, just go in there and disable it. Okay, so when you want to set up your cloud account, after you've got Crowdrender installed and it's working, basically you just head to our website. You can actually do this when you download. It's probably the best time to do it, because clicking download is basically going to take you to the cloud account. You can get there other ways, but this is probably the easiest way. You just hit the download button, and pretty much if you've logged in prior to, it'll just log you straight in. And then you just come to Cloud Home to set up your cloud account, and you'll notice there's a setup sort of section here with a guide, and in this guide you can just go through each step, so you can download it if you haven't already, and there'll be little check marks telling you if you've completed that step. Update your password. This is very important because pretty much you need to set a password, because basically I'm logged in here in Blender. When you first use it, you won't be, and it'll ask you for your email, which is the email you signed up for your cloud account with when you wanted to download the add-on, and it'll ask you for a password, and that password is the one you set here. And you can also reset your password if you want to change it, and the reset password will change both your cloud account password here and also the one that you use here to log in through the add-on. And once you've set that, basically install the add-on. You can tick that yourself once you've done it, and then finally, if you want to, you can optionally, recharge or charge your account with some credit and use some of those cloud-based render nodes. And those render nodes are quite powerful. I think they're 36 threads and about 60 gigs of RAM. So, a couple of those, and you've got a pretty powerful rendering system already. Okay, so you can just use PayPal if you've got a PayPal account or a credit card if you want to charge your account with some credit. Give it a try, and I'm pretty sure you'll like it because I use this myself and it is pretty good. And now you might have a couple of computers just lying around your place or in your office, and you can connect to as many as you like, really. So I've got a couple here which are currently online. You can see I've got some other ones, but they're actually not available at the moment. They're either switched off or not running Blender. So the way that you get another computer ready to render is you start Blender on it like this, and you make sure the add-on is started. So you see the Crowdrender panel looks like this, and then automatically in the background it will start up a server for you that you'll be able to connect to. And the reason I like the cloud account is because it will show you when a computer is actually online and ready for a connection by making it bold like this, and also adding a couple of extra controls to it, which I'll explain in a second. But we want to connect to these computers first, otherwise we can't do anything with them. So you can connect to them individually by pressing this button, and then it usually shows you the name and the IP address that it's figured out from the network, and then you can press OK. So you can do that individually for each one. The alternative is if you've got a lot of computers that you want to connect to at once, you can press this button and that connects to everything. A big improvement in 0.16 over the previous version is this is now a lot faster, particularly in cases where you've got a lot of computers like this which don't have an IP address because they're off. In the old version of 0.15, it would take forever to get through this list of computers trying each one. We've now done this all in parallel, so it's a lot faster. And you can see we've split it up as well. This panel is a new feature. It shows you here are all the computers which are basically off or we couldn't find an internet protocol address for, which means we're not going to be able to connect to them. And down here are the ones which are ready to connect and we know the IP addresses of. And you can edit these if you want, but generally you're going to leave these alone. So before we connect to them, I'm just going to talk a little bit about if you're going to add computers yourself. Like obviously I've got a cloud account, so all my computers automatically populate. So you'll see that if I reopen the startup file, it's initially blank, but then once it contacts our server, it actually populates automatically all the computers that I've got. Each of these computers have been logged into my account at some point, and so they're remembered. If you want to add a new one, you can add James's PC or something like that. And the best way to do this is add the computer by its host name. If you don't know what a host name is, it's quite easy to figure out. You can just Google it for your operating system, and there'll be some resources there, I'm sure, that will tell you how to do it. The host name means that when you click this button, our add-on is going to be able to resolve that host name to its network address. And that pretty much results in when you press connect, and this panel appears, which it will do in just a second, it's used this name to figure out what network address to use. If you type in some other name, basically it will end up in this list at the top with it can't find the address. If you know the address, you can type it in manually, but just remember, I'll actually show you. If I type in the wrong address, which is more than likely in some cases it can happen, the other two are going to connect fine because they've been automatically resolved to the right network address, but the other one, James's PC, is going to fail, and it usually takes about 30 seconds for it to fail. I'll also just explain quickly like what happened there. You might have seen like just a flurry of activity up here with this changing. It's gone and uploaded this scene to each of those nodes. And now they're actually ready to render. But I just wanted to sort of show you this whole connecting to other computers thing. And you can see there that one's finally failed to connect. So if you do have a problem, it'll take probably about 30 seconds because our network software will try and contact the other machine, but it will give up after about 30 seconds. So now that these computers are synchronized, or synced as they say here, we can actually use them to render. And that's pretty simple. So we're going to discuss that in the next section of the video, which is rendering. Okay, so once your computers are synced, the way to render in Crowdrender is actually not to use F12. We use a very different way of doing it because we've had problems trying to do it the other way, where we have a render engine in here. So the way that you do it is you basically select your render engine from the list. I'm going to select cycles, and then you come over to the Crowdrender panel, and you can see here we've got the buttons render still and animation, and those are the buttons that you'll use. And you can see it renders, and each tile from each computer comes back, and then you're done your rendering. And it will do animation renders as well. So you'll see now if I do an animation render, it'll render frame 1, and then frame 2, and so on and so forth. And it will just keep going until it's rendered the entire range. So the only real difference when you're rendering with Crowdrender is you just use these buttons, but they work in pretty much exactly the same way as do these buttons here. So the only other thing I want to mention about rendering, well, actually, it's a couple of things. Firstly, we've got a new menu here, which is about load balancing. So load balancing just means, I'll demonstrate really quickly. When you render, you'll notice sometimes a lot of the screen is given to one computer and not to another, like just happened there. That's because our add-on computes how much effort each computer actually expended rendering that scene, and also how long it took. And it uses that information to better predict how much of the screen area in total should be given to each computer, so they finish more or less the same time. Now, we've noticed that if you're just doing a single still frame render, our load balancing can sometimes not really be the best. So we gave you the option to have a manual way of setting how much of the screen area gets given to each computer. So right now, as it's set 100% or 1.0, meaning all of the screen area is going to be rendered locally. Now we don't want that because this is my laptop and I don't want to render that much. So I can actually pull this down to maybe, let's just say somewhere around, I'm going to try and set it to 10%. And the others have automatically adjusted because this needs to add up to 1 so that the entire screen area is rendered. So they will automatically adjust as you change them. So for example, if I start increasing this, you'll see the others decreasing. So I'm going to set this back to about 0.1-ish or 10%, and then just do a render. We should notice that this computer renders about 10% of the screen, which is about that much. Okay, so that's what this does. And manual is better for single frames. Automatic, with this switched off, is better if you're going to do an animation, and that way it will continually assess and reassess and recalculate how much area is given to each of the machines. And you can actually see it once a frame has been completed, it will display how much of the screen it gave to each computer in here. So if you just refresh it by reopening it, you should see exactly how much of the screen area is being given by the automatic load balancing. So you can actually see what it's doing, and that might help you sometimes in troubleshooting or diagnosing why you're not getting the best performance. And you've got the option then to just take over and do manual load balancing instead. So the other feature I want to discuss with rendering, I'm just going to stop that animation render, is this. So one of the feature requests we had from, I think, a number of artists was to control how the files for the image tiles which are sent back from each computer are dealt with in terms of file compression. So when you render, an image tile is actually sent back from each computer as a file, like that one or that one or that one, as you just saw them appear. Now each of these files can have compression on them, and I want to show you the difference. So Pixar24 or PXR24, which is what it stands for, if you render still, you'll notice that when the render is complete, you barely even notice them getting the tile. because this is a very, I would say, efficient compression format. It makes very small files. Uncompressed is none, and I want to just show you what the difference is here. Bearing in mind, this is not a very complicated image, and it's also standard definition size. You look how much longer it takes to get the image tiles when you're using no compression, versus Pixar or PXR24, which is blindingly quick. Like, you don't even see it half the time. But I also want to point out that the problems with these lossy compression formats is you do lose color information, and some folk didn't like that. So in 015 and previous versions, we by default used DreamWorks Animation A lossy, and we had a few people point out that that was not what they wanted. They wanted control over this. So we've given you this menu so you can now control the compression format if you wish. It is actually on a lossless format by default, and it's actually the same setting as your output settings for OpenEXR. And I want to tell you this because this is quite important. If you're going to be outputting your frames to OpenEXR at all, then whatever you set here, notice I just set this to none, is set here as well. So if I set that back to lossy and go back down, you'll notice it's set to lossy here too. So the logic behind this is, if you decide that you want no compression and you want all of your complete color information untouched by any compression artifacts, and you want that to persist all the way through to outputting your files, you can actually do that. And Crowdrender will obey that setting. Where you might run into problems though with this, and why I want to bring it up, is the fact that if you select a lossy compression format here for your output, essentially the image data is going to go through two compressions. The first compression it will go through is when you're rendering, as each tile completes, it's compressed before being sent back to the computer you're working on, and then when the frame is actually output to disk, it's compressed a second time. So you might want to think about how you want to use this setting in the future, and also maybe just give us some comments in the comment section below about whether you think this is the best way to do it, because we're really open to making this better. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is real-time updates. So one of the distinguishing features of Crowdrender is the fact that you can make tiny little changes without uploading your whole project. Let's just imagine that you've got a project which is maybe 80 gigabytes in size. I have heard of some projects which are that big. If all you wanted to do is move the camera and then you wanted to use a render farm, either your own local one or one in the cloud, then the chances are you'd have to upload the entire file. In Crowdrender, we can actually do certain edits without ever having to upload the blend file. So you'll notice that if I, let's just say, duplicate this object, you'll notice how there's a notification saying that one of the computers is synchronized, and you can check they both are. And if we render now, what you'll notice is without having to upload any file at all, the extra cube has appeared and it's rendered. And it's rendered even no matter which of the computers is actually covering that part of the screen. We can also do other edits. We can rotate it, scale it, and it stays synchronized. And this feature really is just to help you do final tweaks or fixes to your scene just before you do your final render on a render farm. And because it's going to be a really big pain in the ass if you realize, oh gosh, now I've got to upload about 80 gigabytes worth of data just to change maybe some settings on the camera. So pretty much any kind of setting like this in the cameras or the objects, so focal length for example, position, scale, rotation, all of that stuff can be updated in real time, as can all of the render settings. It's probably easier in some respects to talk about what you can't update. So I'm going to make sure we've got a world. I'm going to click Use Nodes, and you've noticed initially it said sync failed, but then it actually went back to synced. That's because to some degree Crowdrender can cope with some things which it cannot sync properly by repairing itself, but I'm going to do something in a sec which is going to actually break that. So I've added the ability to use nodes for the world shader. Now if I wanted to change the strength of the background or the color, which I can do. So if I make the color maybe just a bluish color, you'll see that everything stays synced. And if I go back to the default scene for just a second and render, we'll see that all my changes so far are still synchronized. So all the computers will render with the correct values for the color for the world shader. And now I'm going to show you what happens when you do something that's not supported. So I'm going to go back to compositing, and I'm going to add a sky texture node. As soon as I drop that in, you'll notice they say they are sync failed, which means they cannot actually replicate this change on the other computers, and they need help. So when you do something like this and you see sync failed, or if you notice there's a problem where you've got one of the render tiles not showing the correct render output, the way to fix that is actually quite simple. So in this case, you can actually use what's called a resync, which resynchronizes by uploading the blend file again. So I'll just do that now. You see that's actually very fast because I'm on a local network and this file isn't that big. But there is a file upload progress there, which will show you how long or how much of the file's actually been transferred. So now we can re-render after resyncing, and we should see that we've now got the correct effect from the sky texture. Now there will be times when you may not be able to get the synchronization to work. There are a couple of tricks you can use. The first is obviously to save your file. So save it somewhere, wherever you want to. The next thing would be to basically reopen that file or revert. Typically I find that reopening the file works the best and tends to fix most of the issues where you cannot get the file to sync properly. So I just want to have a quick recap of what you can and can't do in real time. So any kind of object transform, so your rotate, your scale, translate, all that stuff will work. Camera settings, so for example, any attributes in here, shift, clipping, all that stuff you can do. Any render settings you can do. That's pretty much about it for now. We're working on being able to real-time update everything, but that's a bit of a mission, and it's going to take us a little while to get there. So that's pretty much real-time updates. Think about it as a way to tweak your scene just before you send it to final render, and maybe just do any compositional changes or settings changes before you actually commit to a final render. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is actually show you the cloud rendering in operation. So if you wanted to try it out, this is how you get it to work. So recap the section on how to set up your cloud account if you haven't done that yet, because you'll need to have done that section before this makes any sense whatsoever. So once you've logged in to your cloud account, you'll get this panel showing you how much credit you've got left, and also it'll show you how many nodes you want, which I haven't got set to anything at the moment, and how much it's ready to start requesting. So what these numbers mean is that right now I don't want any nodes, and the system is saying, okay, cool, I'm not going to request any. So what I want to do is I want to request one server node, and it says it's ready to request one. Now it's not actually going to start requesting any until you hit this button. So what this means is you can sort of queue up however many nodes that you might want to start, and then it'll basically say, right, well, I'm ready to request 5 as soon as you start doing it, but I don't want to do 5, I'll just do 1. 5's a bit too many. So to actually start the nodes up, I'm going to press Start Cloud Nodes. You'll see a little greeting and also I guess it's kind of like a little warning that this can take up to 5 minutes sometimes. Since Blender Grid have made some pretty fantastic changes to their API, it's actually a lot quicker, but it can still take up to about a minute to see the node appear here sometimes, and then about another minute for it to actually come online. I'm going to just wait, and if it takes a long time in post-pro, I'll probably just speed this section up. But just to give you a bit of a warning, when you do actually say, hey, I want to start up one of these servers, it can take a little bit of time just before it appears. So I'm just going to just leave this thing running. Now I want to explain a little bit more about how this works, and especially in terms of the use of credit. So when you've put some credit in your account, it will start being reduced once the computer starts. Now this means you'll be using a little bit of credit waiting for it to first fully boot up and load Blender and Crowdrender. That won't be much credit though, because we actually bill on a sliding scale where 100% of CPU power is 100% billing rate and idle is at a much lower rate. So when it's just booting up and when it's just uploading your blend file, it's not going to be using credit at a huge amount. We're actually giving you a little bit of, I suppose, grace so that you can upload big files without sort of chomping through your credit. So now we've had this new node appear. So this is the server node. Now it says it's starting up, so it's not actually ready yet. So when you see this, basically it means that you're being charged now for it to be used. And also it's going to take maybe another sort of 30 seconds to a minute for it actually to become online. And when it comes online, it'll go dark or bold like this one. And it means that you're ready to connect to it. So I'm just going to wait a little bit longer just for it to finish booting up. Okay, so it's now booted up and you can see it's gone bold, and we now have basically a random number which represents this node's name, and we can now connect to it. So we're going to go ahead and connect to this computer, which is actually somewhere in the United States, I believe. I'm over here in Australia, so it's going to be interesting seeing just how the internet behaves between here and there. So I've just asked to connect to it. It's told me that it's ready, so it's received my connection request. And here we go, we're uploading this blend file, which is not too bad. I mean, this file is actually tiny, so it doesn't surprise me that's moved pretty quick. And we're going to render. Now, what I'm going to do is show you what happens if you do not optimize manually the first time a new node appears. So remember in the rendering section we talked about the load balancer? Well, pretty much this node is an unknown. Our load balancer's never seen it before. So the first time I render with it, it's actually only going to do a tiny little bit of the screen, which you'll see there. Like, look at that. It's done this tiny little thing. Next time we render with it, it'll actually do a lot more. If you want to avoid that, I'd suggest doing manual load balancing, which will obey just whatever you tell it to, and give the cloud node a serious amount of the screen to do, because it's probably going to be more powerful than your computer, unless you've got something with a really beefy CPU or GPU in. So now we've done one render, we're just going to do a few more, and you'll see actually how it starts to figure out, hey, this computer's actually a hell of a lot more powerful than we thought it was, and it will start to give more of the screen to it than to the other guys. And that's important. We want this other computer to actually do most of the work. If the load balancer seems to sort of be dragging its feet a bit and not giving a great amount of work to that new node, then you can actually just go in here and go, you know what, like, I'm just going to give this guy most of it. About 2/3. There we go. And now you can see he's actually doing some work. Getting the tile. Done. What you can also do as well is you can render a few times like that, and that actually gives Crowdrender a bit more information of what that computer is capable of, and then you can just go back to automatic. Okay, so let's actually test this with a proper scene, because I've just been doing cubes here. It'd be good to actually show you what this thing is, actually capable of. And also it'd be good to actually upload a decent sized scene. So this is a little bit bigger than the default scene. I think this file is about 3 megabytes, whereas the default one's about 0.5 megabyte. So it's a little bit bigger. And you can see here it's actually struggling. Well, not struggling, but it's obviously taking a lot longer. You might notice as well there's an issue here where occasionally an old cloud node will get saved into the blend file. It's not actually a real one, so you can just remove it and it won't repopulate again. That's probably going to be a fix for another release. Also notice that we're still requesting 1 even though we've got 3. This is kind of a safety feature that someone can't send you a file which is like requesting 100 nodes and you open it. It's only going to use the amount that you were requesting before you open the file. However, if I change this to 2 or 0, it would then actually act upon my request. So I'm just going to set that back to 1, and it will still just keep requesting 1. As soon as you change this number, it will actually issue a change to the server and start things requesting whatever number that you've got here. So that's very important. Particularly, there's a a bit of a finicky issue with this, which we're looking for a solution for in the next build. If you set this to 0, or if this is set to 0 and you open a file, so let's just say this file had it saved as 0 and I opened it from the previous setting where I was at requesting 1, eventually it would shut down. And this is because Crowdrender designed that if your client crashes or your computer crashes, it stops actually sending messages to our server, and our server stops the cloud node so you don't waste all your credit. Which is, it's a safety feature for you, so you don't see all your money in form of credits just get used up by a node just doing nothing, which would be a waste for you. However, if this is set to 0, it also stops those requests. So if this was set to 0 here, and I actually let that be executed, even if it didn't change this number, it actually stops the request from happening. So that's a bit of a bug that we've got to fix, but you want to know about it because if you do open a file like this, which has a 0 here, even if you are still requesting 1, it effectively stops the request happening. And that stopping of requests then triggers our server to shut down on your behalf so you don't waste all your credit because it thinks, oh, it looks like your computer just died. Right, so confession time. There's actually one important feature or facet of the cloud system I want to talk about, and that's that we have a minimum amount of credit necessary to use the system, and that minimum amount is $2. And if you go below $2, you won't be able to start any new nodes, as I'll demonstrate. So if I do this, if I press 1, I've only got $1.85, and all of a sudden I start getting these messages, oops, you need render credit. You need a render credit balance, although it doesn't say that, so apologies, we're going to have to fix this, and also we're going to have to fix the fact that you have to play, the equivalent of whack-a-mole with these notifications. There's just tons of them. But yeah, so you'll need to top your account up if it goes below $2, that's the basics of it. Now, unfortunately, when you're rendering, those notifications might not turn up, but your render will just stop. So we are working on improvements to the system that mean that you can either have an auto top-up if you just want to keep rendering. The other thing you can do is just make sure that you've got enough render credit in your account. And you can top it up as you're rendering. So if you notice that you're getting close to $2 and you want to keep using the render nodes, you can just top it up as you go. Anyway, that's enough sort of techno-babble for now. I'm just going to go through these computers, and one of my local ones says it's failed. So in this case, you wouldn't want to re-upload the blend file to everyone because these guys are okay, so you can actually individually do it. And so I'm just going to take a little bit of a tangent here to talk about the controls here. So if you haven't used Crowdrender before, if you open this menu, you can see there's a few things in here. And the first one you'll see is this little button here, which resyncs. And it does a local resync, which means what it's going to do is it's going to upload the file just for that computer like that. And that means I only had to send a file to this one. I didn't have to send it to everybody, because if you hit this button, guess what? You're sending it to everybody. And that might be okay for the guys who are on the local network because they've got a really close and fast connection. But for the computer that's in Ohio, that's a long way. And it can actually take quite a long time. As you can see, it's struggling here to actually get through to the point where it's even uploading the file. I know it says uploading 100%, but trust me, it's actually going to in a minute realize that it needs to actually upload it again. That feature of being able to just press this button means that you can avoid this. And it looks like, in this case, let's just try that again. Okay, they're happy, but Mr. Cloud Node is not. So if this does happen to you, or it gets stuck, you can actually just reconnect by pressing this button. Reconnection is a brute force way of dealing with the problem because it will actually kill the process on the remote computer and start it again. And that is handy in cases like this where you think, okay, this node looks like it's badly glitched, so I actually want to get rid of it without stopping the requests though. There you see, so it says exited, and then it should progress back into a state of being reconnected. Sometimes it can take a while. It depends on how busy the internet traffic is. And now it's back to synced. Okay, so if that ever happens to you, just remember, just press this and it will kill the process and reconnect to it. And as long as the blend file on that system is intact, you'll find that it's synced. And now we can render. Now, I want to discuss a little bit more about this menu. So see, we opened this and we talked about Resync. You can also set individual render tile sizes. So this is if you, for example, had a GPU, you might want to set a larger tile size. So you could set something like, I don't know, 128 by 128. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set them back to 0 because I've only got CPUs. Likewise, you can select which device you want to render on. So when you select CPU, it'll just say CPU. If you did have a GPU, it would appear here. I don't, not on these computers anyway. You can select CUDA-based GPUs for NVIDIA or OpenCL if you've got a Radeon card. I'm going to select CPU. So you can actually mix, you can have some render on CPU and some on GPU, and the load balancing, which I discussed through this menu here, will take care of it. Or you can manually, I suppose, sort of guesstimate how much you should give each machine based on your experience. And this is just a great way to control exactly how the group of computers you've got will render and what hardware they'll actually use. The camera icon here basically works similar to in the outliner. It just means that these computers will not render if they're grayed out like that. So if you don't want them to render, you just turn them all off. And then you'll see that when you render, the only computer that's going to do it, so if I go back here, is going to be the cloud one, which is great because that's what I want. This is why I've got this powerful server here, is so that I can use it to render much faster than I could with the other computers. This I might speed up because I've actually turned up the settings way too high on this benchmark. I was mucking around with it, and now it looks like it's going to take a long time for it to render. Okay, so it's finished doing the rendering. It's going to go and get, it's getting the image file. You can see now it says it's downloading it, and then once it's downloaded, it's going to run it through the compositor for us automatically and then spit out the final output. And then we're pretty much done. Okay, so I just need to get back into the video. Sorry about that. There we go. There it is. It took about 4 minutes. It's not too bad. It probably took that long because I did 1,600 transmission samples. That was to try and fix up the stuff that happens in the headlights, which is quite hard to get to not be noisy. But anyway, so there you go, rendered from Australia to Ohio. And now I could actually get all these other computers to join back in, but we're kind of running short on time. Okay, well that's pretty much it for now. I'm going to obviously stop my cloud nodes, and once you press stop, your billing stops pretty much immediately, and then usually within about 1 to 2 minutes, this computer will disappear. It may stick around and render a few more things, but you'll run the risk that if you're still using it and when it stops, it could actually stop your entire render. We're working on a better load balancer. Check the crowdfunding link because that's the next goal we've got for the crowdfunding campaign, is to build a better load balancer which will actually not do that. So yeah, well that's the end of our tutorial / demonstration for the latest release of our network rendering add-on for Blender, version 0.16. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope it's been useful to you. If it has, please don't forget to do the usual thing that we tell you to do, like, subscribe and comment and all that kind of stuff. That is actually very appreciated. It does help us. Also, don't forget that this is available from our website for free. You can go there, download it, and use it to distribute your renders and shave a lot of time off how long it takes to get your projects finished. So yeah, go check it out and let us know what you think. Until the next time, see you later.